Okay, so tonight is not about productivity tips, right? Nobody needs more productivity tips. Today, we're here because we feel that something deeper is stirring, something that is whispering this knowing that we have that we're not just here to build something, we're here to remember something. And so today's theme is leading from evolutionary purpose. Evolutionary purpose. Okay, so we're going to explore the difference between hustle culture and chasing goals compared to the mystic path of visionary leadership, which means listening to the living intelligence of a project or organization. Because when you lead from purpose and not from pressure, you don't have to force momentum. You align with it. The next wave of leadership isn't about setting the vision, it's about attuning to the vision that's already moving through the field and learning to see it, learning to align with it, learning to walk it forward. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. Let's start by defining this new term that we dropped today, evolutionary purpose. Okay, so what is evolutionary purpose? Evolutionary purpose is the living, unfolding intelligence at the heart of a person, a project, or an organization. Evolutionary purpose is not something that we invent. We don't make it up. It's not a static mission statement. You know, a fixed static mission statement will never be the same thing as evolutionary purpose. Evolutionary purpose is something that is discovered. It's listened to, it's aligned with, it is grown with. Traditional goals are usually fixed, bound by time, and outcome driven. Right? How many of us have read those books about how to be better at life or how to make more money? What do they tell us to do? They tell us to set goals which are fixed, measurable, time bound, outcome driven. Okay, but in this space, we're contrasting from that old world paradigm. Unlike that traditional frame of goals, evolutionary purpose, it can be pressure too. Evolutionary purpose evolves as consciousness evolves. It's not fixed, it's not bound within time, it's not outcome driven. It's evolving, it's fluid, it's dynamic. It reveals itself in layers over time. It invites us into partnership with the deeper life force that is animating our work. So, evolutionary purpose can be framed through a question that we ask. Okay, and I really invite you to tune into this, like lean into this question. What wants to happen through us if we truly listen? What is it that wants to happen through us? When we ask this question, when we're willing to listen to that deeper thread of intelligence and allow that to guide us, that's when we can get in touch with the soul of the work. Not just the why, the soul. Okay, so not just why we're doing something, but really what it is becoming. What is it? What is what we're doing ultimately becoming? Okay, so we're going to give a couple of examples here. We're going to give an example of this from an individual lens, a small business lens, and a global enterprise lens. And then lastly, an NGO or nonprofit lens. Okay. And as I go through these examples, I want you to consider how these concepts might apply to you and your work individually, in your community, and then at scale. Okay. So starting with individual evolutionary purpose, imagine someone feeling unfulfilled in a high paying job. They begin to sense that their life is about something more than what they're currently waking up and doing every day. Maybe they don't have a name for it yet, but they notice that something inside them stirs when they mentor others, when they write, when they create sacred space. And so, because they're listening to the soul of their work and they're noticing this feeling, they choose to follow this feeling. And as they follow the feeling, they begin to discover their evolutionary purpose. They begin to recognize that their evolutionary purpose is to midwife transformation in others by speaking truth and creating ritual containers for awakening. Okay, now that's not a job title. That's a guiding flame of purpose. Okay, so someone who's on this mission to midwife transformation in others by speaking truth and creating ritual containers for awakening, that could take the form of multiple job titles. Okay, so we can leave a question mark in terms of what job title fulfills that, but at least we know that that guiding flame of evolutionary purpose, at least we know what that is. And now, because it is evolving, we know that that concept of the shape that that takes will also evolve as this individual steps deeper into alignment with their purpose. Okay, so let's continue by looking at this through the perspective of a small business. Okay, so consider this. A yoga studio starts out just wanting to offer classes and pay the rent. But over time, the founder of this yoga studio begins listening to something deeper. And they notice through the conversations they're having with the yoga students, by paying attention to the energy in the room, by being aware of synchronicities, things that just seem to be aligned, they begin to notice that there's a pattern emerging. And this evolutionary purpose reveals itself as this: to be a community hearth for nervous system healing, generational unwinding, and sovereign embodiment. Okay, so naturally, this changes everything. Now they're going to evolve from just offering classes and paying the rent. Now there's an evolutionary purpose, a guiding flame that really is everything they're doing, they're seeking to do in alignment with this guiding flame. Changes everything. Now the classes are designed differently. Now the way that the community is nurtured, right? It's nurtured to this purpose. Okay, let's do a third example here at a larger scale, a global enterprise. Okay, most of you are probably familiar with the high performance outdoor gear company called Patagonia. Over decades of listening and, let's be honest, being courageous, Patagonia has come into alignment with its evolving purpose. Okay, and its purpose is basically to save our home planet. And this goes way beyond a marketing slogan for them. It actually is the compass that guides how they do everything. How they design clothes, how and why and where they invest money, the people they hire, the ways that they are activists politically and within their communities, and how they engage with what they perceive as the global challenges. Now, this evolutionary purpose has even made its way into the very structure of how Patagonia operates. The billionaire founder of Patagonia gave away the ownership of the company to a trust that protects environmental action. Okay, so they're completely sold out to their evolutionary purpose. Okay, so let's look at another example, that of an NGO or nonprofit. What is an example of an NGO evolutionary purpose? Okay, so let's say a humanitarian organization begins as a hunger relief group, but as staff and stakeholders tune in over time, perhaps the deeper evolutionary purpose emerges as this: to restore dignity and self determination through regenerative food systems. Okay, so there's a world of difference between a food bank and an organization operating under the evolutionary purpose of restoring dignity and self determination through regenerative food systems. Okay, so this is a shift in language and it's a shift in consciousness. And this shift transforms how aid is delivered from charity to collaboration, moving from charity into collaboration. So it's not just, oh, let me, give you a fish so you can eat for today. It's how can we collaborate with you to restore dignity and self-determination? And then it moves from temporary fixes of, oh, let's go out and do a food drive, right? Which, you got to go do again next season, to how can we heal the ecosystem and create a system of food that is regenerative. Okay, so here's the key takeaway. Evolutionary purpose is not about what you do. It is about what you are becoming in partnership with the soul of your work. Okay, like usual on these calls, I usually note take in the chat. I'm going to do that today as well. So I'm going to put these little blurbs in the chat. And I'm also going to read it again. Evolutionary purpose is not about what you do. It's about what you are becoming in partnership with the soul of your work. And this is where the paradigm begins to shift, because so much of the old paradigm was focused on, what are we going to do? What is the action? What is the goals? But this is more aligned with the teal organization way of looking at things. And that's what we spoke about last week, teal organizations. A teal organization is operating under this premise of what is our evolutionary purpose? What is this? What desires to express through us? Our work is not soulless, it is soulful. So let's trust that whatever it is that we're here to do has an intelligence of its own. And let's choose to partner with the intelligence that is the soul of this work. So this can't be dictated, it must be discerned. And it doesn't respond to hustle, it responds to alignment and attunement. Okay, so our first chat prompt of today. So share in the chat here on Discord on the stage. If your work had a soul and a voice, what would it be asking you today? And one sentence answers are fine. The goal here is to engage with this in a way where it starts to become alive in your awareness. If your work had a soul and a voice, what would it be asking you today? I'm going to be silent for a moment and allow you to consider this. What is the soul of your work saying? Some great answers coming in from the chat. Express your true self. Please listen, follow the rhythm. All will unfold. Why are you selling yourself short? You're better than this. How could we be or do better today? Keep going. You are building momentum and doing a great job of that. Awesome. Thank you, those of you that shared in the chat. All right, we're going to keep going. Okay, so segment 2, let's talk about listening to purpose in practice. Okay, so how do we let's now explore how to listen to the evolutionary purpose that is unfolding within and around you. And keep in mind, purpose does not usually shout. Purpose usually whispers. It doesn't arrive in bullet points. It arrives in patterns, in symbols, in inner nudges, and felt shifts. So the goal here is to learn to listen and listen well. And to do so, there are 3 kinds of attunement. The first type of attunement is called inner listening. And I'm going to note take this in the chat. Inner listening. So, inner listening considers yourself as the tuning fork. Okay, so this is paying attention to your body, your emotions, and your intuition, and considering those three things, body, emotions, intuition, to be intelligent instruments. So, to access these instruments, we practice stillness to learn to sense subtle shifts. We can use journaling as a form of channeling, not from the mind, not from the neocortex, not from, our local self or local awareness, but really to tap into what is present in the field. And we can treat synchronicities as spiritual email from the cosmos. Okay, so as an example, talking about that first one, practicing stillness. There's been many times over my career that I'm just on a mission and I'm just doing something. I'm so focused on it, and I just kind of steamroll my way towards the objective. And then I get there and something's not right. And it's like I feel like I'm finding out after the fact. And when I sit and do the postmortem, when I look back over what happened and I'm like, okay, what did I miss? I realize that I hadn't actually taken the time to become still enough to sense the field. Now, as I've grown in all of these areas, I've learned, in part the hard way, to do this, to stop, to find stillness, to ask questions, and to not just assume that I know what the best action is to take right now, but rather listen for the guidance. Okay, so to merge my intelligence, my local intelligence, with the intelligence of the field. Okay, so I consider, as an example, that the Mystery School of Imagination is an entity that has its own intelligence. It is a field, and it has its own evolutionary purpose. And I'm temporarily a steward of it. I'm working as a partner with the soul of this organization, that I founded, or was founded through me, in 2019. So that means when I'm making decisions about the business, about the school, I can't just assume that it's all on me. The way to make decisions in alignment with this perspective of evolutionary purpose is to, consider my own opinion, and then also to become still and ask the soul of the work, what do you desire to express through me or through this? Okay, so let's do a fictional case study. Okay, let's consider that you have launched your business. Okay, and you're sitting alone and you're in a cabin and you're looking at the metrics, of how your launch has gone, whatever your project is, your business. And the metrics look fine on the surface. The click-through rates look good, the engagement rates look good, your emails are being opened, people are buying, but something feels off. So what do? You light a candle. You open up your journal to a fresh page and you start to write without thinking. And out of your pen comes a phrase. It's time to teach, not just perform. Later that day, you check your phone, and a friend has sent you a quote about moving from spectacle to sacred transmission. And now you know that the project is evolving. And it's interesting to point out that your body knew first. Okay, so that's our first of three types of attunement. Inner listening, using the self as a tuning fork, your body, your emotions, your intuition, considering that they are intelligent instruments. Okay, let's move to the second lens. The second lens is relational listening. Relational listening. This is using your team as a resonance chamber. So consider that when two or more gather, the project field, whatever you're collaborating with these other people on, that field begins to speak. Okay, so there's an opportunity when you recognize this to start your meetings by saying, what is the project asking of us today? You can also track energy during your calls or meetings. Where does it spark? Where do you feel that lift? And where do you feel the sag? And then add that to your meeting notes, right? Point it out. And you can also create shared rituals to mark shifts in the work. Rituals are part of how we engage with the sacred language of the reality simulation. Through action, through thought, word, deed, right? So rituals are important. Marking shifts is important. And through shared rituals, we ensure that everyone on the team is in resonance and in this chamber and all on the same page. Okay, so let's do a fictional snapshot. Okay, so imagine you're on a Zoom call with your team and everybody's, taking turns going through their updates, but the energy just feels flat. Finally, someone pauses and says, "Wait, are we still supposed to be doing this launch? Does it feel alive to anyone?" The call falls silent. And then a couple of people start to nod. One person shares a dream they had. Another describes a moment of flow when they were working off script. By the end of the call, the team agrees to pivot, not because of logic, but because of resonance. Okay, so before I go any further, I want to check in with you all. Is this landing? Are we standing on sacred ground together? Are you feeling the vibe of evolutionary purpose? Beautiful. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your energy and your presence. Okay, let's talk about the third lens of evolutionary purpose. This is putting purpose into practice. Okay, so quick recap. We did the self as tuning fork, which is listening inside to your body, your emotions, your intuition, and treating them as intelligent instruments with something to say. Okay, becoming still enough that you can listen to them. Second, we talked about using the team as a resonance chamber and validating energy shifts as being a form of intelligence. Okay, so tracking, where does the team feel like it's found its flow? Where is the energy falling flat? And how can we respect what the field is telling us? And number three is listening to the field, the larger system as oracle. Okay, notes on number three going in the chat now. Okay, so listening to the field. So, you and I, we're not separate from the world. Okay, we're constantly in communication with it. And so, the truth is the ecosystem itself, the field, the world, the planet, the, society, civilization, time and space, the dimension, the ecosystem gives signals. Okay, so this is about feeling timing. Is this the season for what I'm trying to do? Is this the right moment? Is the earth, is, my audience, is this the time? Are they ready for it? Are they asking for it? Right? So this comes down to learning to trust when your intuition tells you to pivot. Okay, even when it doesn't make sense on paper, as long as it feels aligned, we as visionary leaders must learn to treat that as supremely valuable. And it's also important for us to begin to use somatic intelligence as data. Okay, so noticing things like when someone's talking about something and an idea comes out, and all of a sudden you're feeling goosebumps. Okay, and then someone else says, "Oh, we could do it like this other way," and all of a sudden you feel like you want to throw up. And then someone else says, "Oh, but we haven't considered this. What about this segment of the audience?" And all of a sudden you feel this tug on your heart. Okay, now I identify as an empath. So all of these things, like, yeah, I feel these things whole bodied. I've also learned to turn up the volume by paying attention. But if you're, if you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh, I've never considered this," or "I don't know that I get these types of things," it's really about removing the filters and choosing to listen. Okay, because there's a chance your reticular activating system filters out this data because you've never treated it as important, possibly. Okay, but once you choose to treat it as important and pay attention and become still, now this is data. Okay, so I'm going to give you a real world example, and then I'm going to give you this another fictional snapshot. Okay, so on Sunday morning, I was ready for Sunday Mystery School, which is the weekly broadcast I do on my YouTube channel. And on Friday, and I think it was Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, it was like 3 days, an hour or two each day, I had been working on what I was going to present, working on the outline, working on the slides, the images, how to communicate this. And I had this, topic selected, and I thought, this is what we're going to talk about, as a part of an arc. Everything logically made sense. And you know what happened? I woke up on Sunday morning and I pulled out my phone and I looked at the outline and I felt this massive sag of energy. I didn't have any logical reason not to proceed with that plan, but I felt the sag and I was like, "Okay." I looked at the clock and I was like, "Look, I got 3 hours, universe, until this thing goes live. What do you desire to express through me?" And so I put down my phone and I just sat on the couch and I closed my eyes and I became still. And it arrived right on time. I got the download. It was like, "Josiah, today your mission is to talk about synchronicity through the lens of the mystery school." And I said, "Okay, give me some bullet points." Right? So pulled out my phone, I started taking notes of what the download was coming through. Okay, so long story short, I give this synchronicity broadcast on Sunday. And then I'm seeing messages from the mastermind. I'm seeing messages on Discord. I'm seeing comments on YouTube. People are saying, they're like, "This was so timely for me. I needed to hear this today. This opened up, something that, I've been sitting with and needed to make sense of. It's right on time, message received, message delivered. It was perfect." Okay, so that's an example of listening rather than just assuming that I know. I wasn't wrong to create the curriculum ahead of time, but I was nimble enough to switch midstream. And that's part of being a visionary leader. You have to be willing to pivot even up to the last second if the field demands it. Okay, let's give a fictional snapshot. Let's imagine that you are launching your online course and you've queued up your ads. You've got ads on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. You've drafted your promotional emails. And then you read about a collective grief event. Maybe it's a massive fire. Maybe war breaks out. Maybe something collapses. And suddenly, this curriculum that you've created, honestly, it feels a little tone deaf. And so you pause. And instead of launching the online course, you offer a free ceremony. It becomes your most impactful event. And people write to you, "This is what I needed. Not another webinar. I needed this." So, this is an example of responding to the field. And by doing so, you opened the next layer of trust and a truer, more authentic expression of your evolutionary purpose. Okay, so I'm going to take this real mystic for a second. Let's consider that our projects are like a spell. Okay, so this puts us in the role of both the scribe and the speaker. And this means every choice, every check in, every pivot is part of the incantation. And to hear the soul of your work, you must slow down enough to feel what it is becoming. Okay, so our next chat prompt. What signals have you received lately about your work and what wants to emerge? Feel free to share in the chat, even just a couple words or a sentence, but really, if you brought your journal today, this might be one to jot down and reflect on. I mean, there's a reason you're on this call. We can treat it as synchronicity. So to respect the synchronicity, you can trust that this is a message that, your project is asking you to reflect in this way. What signals have you received lately about what wants to emerge? Okay. I see a couple folks typing in the chat. All right. A chat share says, I've been tuning in to intentional activation over being led by grind culture that says 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Yes. I appreciate you sharing that. That's a theme that I've noticed in this School of Imagination space. A lot of mystics are awakening to the concept of seasons and the ebb and flow of energy. So trying to fit, the intelligence and the energy that you are into the strict, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, blocked schedule. That's an old paradigm way of working. And if you think about what's coming next in the world as we move into this new paradigm, you know, it's going to be all about flowing with the current, right? So you're just on the leading edge of that. Okay. All right. I'm going to keep going because we said we're going to keep this to exactly 1 hour. If you're chatting, if you're typing in the chat, please continue and I'll come back to it. Okay. So let's move into our final segment for today. And this is shifting from goals to guardianship. From goals to guardianship. Okay. So this is the deepest shift in evolutionary leadership. Moving from commanding outcomes to guarding emergence. From commanding outcomes to guarding emergence. This moves from hustle to harmonics and from force to flow. But really, I love that first one the best, from commanding outcomes to guarding emergence. What I love about the term guarding emergence is that it implies it's going to happen no matter what. And we know Neville taught us to live in the end. Okay, so if it's going to happen no matter what, it's already has happened. It's inevitable. So what is our role? Well, it's not to command the outcome. It's already done. Our role is to guard its emergence. The old way told us to set the goal, hit the mark, and push the machine. The new way asks, what wants to unfold here? And how do I honor it? What wants to unfold here? And how do I honor it? Okay, so let's contrast the old paradigm with the evolutionary paradigm. Okay, so the old paradigm told us to set linear goals achieved in a line, right? Uh, dial X number of cold calls in a day, right? Send X number of emails, earn X amount of income, okay? Linear goals. The evolutionary paradigm asks us to set living intentions. Living intentions. Okay, so instead of a dead line of a goal, this is a living intention. It's something alive. We treat it as though it's alive and it has soul. Okay, so an example of this, a linear goal might be, to earn $10,000 a month. Okay, and a living intention might be to embody abundance and cash flow at a level which empowers, tremendous generosity, right? To have more than what you need to the point where it's overflowing. That's a living intention, but it doesn't fit into a box of a linear goal. Okay, so the old paradigm talks about key performance indicators, KPIs, and deadlines. The evolutionary paradigm speaks of milestones and synchronicities. The old paradigm is all about make it happen energy. And the evolutionary paradigm is a frequency of let it happen. Let it happen. The old paradigm tells us we have to hustle to grow. And the evolutionary paradigm says it's time to attune to evolve. Now, keep in mind, this old way, it's not bad or wrong. After all, it did get us here, didn't it? But in order to move forward, we must tune into a different intelligence. We're no longer pushing from the outside in. Now it's time to listen from the inside out. Okay, so looking at the chat from our previous prompt, I see personal, not institutional. I am planning to exhibit some personal photography. And what emerged was learn Lightroom as a first step. So I booked the classes for next week. Brilliant. Next chat message says, I love that. I never fully resonated with the idea of command because it seemed abrasive, but guardians to emergence sounds perfectly aligned as the type of conduit and facilitator that's important to me to be. Without attachment, but with purpose. Okay, so I have some ritual tools that we're going to talk about, and then a mini story snapshot, and then a final chat prompt, and then we're done for today. We got 10 minutes. Okay, so ritual tools for guardian leadership, Nevolution. Yeah. Okay, so for our first tool is the soul check in our meetings. It's beautiful to consider what it looks like to hop into your project meetings, and instead of saying, "Okay, what's our strategy?" It's, "Okay, how are we to be stewards today? What is the soul of this project asking of us today?" That's the way to start because it sets the tone, it sets the frame. That's our first tool, the soul check-in prompt in our project meetings. The second tool is personal journaling prompt. This is when we choose to take some time to sit with our journal, become still, and then ask in a way that invites automatic writing, what does this work want from me now? And we let this question soften our will and sharpen our receptivity. Soften the will, sharpen the receptivity. And our third practice in our ritual tools for guardianship as leaders is a spoken invocation. This is where we set the space before we put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, eyes to screen. We set the space and we speak aloud. I open to the soul of this creation. Show me what is needed. I will listen. So these three tools are not just about hacking mindset, they're about regulating frequency. It's about aligning our nervous system to this concept of emergence and moving us from leading as a boss to leading as a guardian. Okay, a mini story snapshot. Imagine you're nearing a product deadline. You built the launch plan, it's ready, but the deeper purpose feels distant. Instead of just sitting down and forcing yourself to do it and powering through, instead, you open a journal, you become still, and you ask, what does this creation want from me now? Unexpectedly, you receive this phrase: create space for integration. Create space for integration. So you delay the launch by 2 weeks, and instead, you host a quiet circle for your community. No agenda, no pitch, just space. And out of that, the trust deepens. Your engagement triples. Your audience palpably feels the integrity. And because of this, your project becomes more than just a product. It becomes a transmission. This is an example of guardianship, being the guardian of emergence. And this is what it looks like to be a soul led visionary leader. Okay. Another chat prompt here as we come into the close. What landed most for you today in what we've talked about? What landed most? And secondly, what does evolutionary leadership look like for you moving forward? And you can write in your journal. I do invite you to share in that. What landed most for you today, and what does evolutionary leadership look like for you moving forward? A couple of folks typing in the chat. What landed most for you today? What does evolutionary leadership look like for you moving forward? All right, a share from the chat. The idea of nimble leadership resonated for moving forward. My intention is to be more grounded in knowing that this style of leading and activating in my craft is not only viable, but effective. Not being easily swayed to return to old patterns that are unaligned. What landed most is that it is a total recalibration of the field. Evolutionary leadership for me going forward is leading from center. Hyper hyper logic dominated my stillness to listen to the soul of my project. Communication has happened with interesting development, but breaking away from action when intuition speaks too is crucial. Beautiful. Thank you, those that shared in the chat. Okay, so here's our closing invocation. I am not the architect of control. I am the steward of purpose. I listen to the soul of my work, and I choose to co create from that sacred alignment. All right, take a breath with me. Awesome. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Friday afternoon for Evolutionary Purpose in our Visionary Leadership Call. I trust that this has been a blessing to you in some way, insightful. Thanks for being here. I look forward to seeing you all next week, Independence Day here in the US, for our next Visionary Leadership Call. Have a great weekend, everyone. Imagine wisely, and I'll speak with you all again soon.